Ya son 12.
Sí, ya son las 12, hermano. Mira, ya estamos
Hijo
en
de
vivo. Do you want to still...
I can't say hijo de su... You know what I noticed?
Hello.
You know what I noticed recently?
What?
I have the worst laugh to record. It's the worst, most obnoxious laugh. Like when I go back and listen to the podcast, I'm like, what in God's green earth laughs like that?
Do you feel embarrassed by laugh?
Beyond embarrassed, bro.
Beyond embarrassed?
Yeah, I'm like, I need to be more serious because this laughing is just not okay.
Maybe you need to go to a laugh worship. Like,
laugh
okay,
worship?
This is the way
we did that in the night. We did that in the 90s, man. We put up tape lines and try to get... No, never mind. Some of y'all remember that. All right, so I still don't have a voice. It's still
but
a little...
But at least you have a
little
voice.
Chupacabras-y.
Chupacabras-y?
Yeah, we're going to make words up in Texas. All you folks coming in town for Coho weekend, we're going to have to introduce you to the art and science of creating words.
Look, there's someone that is...
We have... no one's laugh is obnoxious. Thanks, Bren.
Thank you.
Mine's obnoxious because I go like McFly. Anyway, we're going to have to introduce all the people coming into town to the art and science of making words. We have strategeries around how to make words. So that's an old Jim George.
Okay, Sunday leftovers.
Sunday leftovers. So Sunday was a hoot, and it was also F1 day. So I had to really work hard today to conjure up any memory of what we did 2 days ago because I was out at the racetrack with 440,000.
Took all your things from your mind.
Just erased my brain.
Okay,
it's like when you download a new operating system on your old phone, you have to erase everything.
Right.
So all I can talk about right now is F1. So I don't even know who preached on Sunday. Did you? No, it was me. It was some clown dressed for Christmas.
I remember a guy dressed like a Mexican flag on the stage.
Yeah. Y'all have to perdonarme for that. Anyway, I'm going to disregard the crass texts coming in from my friend Mike here because I can't read that on there. Okay, so leftovers from Conversation of Jesus.
It was an interesting
memory
parable.
of Jesus' parable.
Yeah.
Where he talks about two guys go into a bar or go into the temple. And I didn't properly credit you, perhaps.
Stop, don't do that.
We steal for each other all the time. But this whole thought that, last Tuesday after the leftovers, I looked at you and I'm like, I don't know what to make of this parable. And you're like, well, they were both isolated. Look at the text again. One standing by himself, one standing far away. And so the metaphor that we pushed it through, thanks to you, and I should have credited you.
You didn't need to do
was
that.
how really what Jesus came to address is not how to pray so much as to take those who are outside the circle and resources of community and bring them back in. If you had to have one single metaphor of the life of Christ and the work that he did for those 3 years that we have record of, it was constantly bringing people back into the circle or stretching the circle to include all people, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of thoughts. And this whole theme of these tax collectors, this is a real class of people that listen.
It's a very interesting
if you take
class of people.
the times that Jesus in the Gospels mentions tax collectors, this is a major staple of his audience.
Yeah.
A lot more even than other people that probably would have figured more prominently. Among the people that must have concerned Jesus the most were Pharisees and tax collectors because they turn up all the time, right? So, and then there's fishermen, and then there's people who are disenfranchised because of medical issues and things
were
like that.
one of the most scandalous group that is gathering around Jesus.
Right.
And they were rejected from society, and of course, their friendships were also rejected people from society.
Right.
So it's a very interesting group.
Yeah, and he has great compassion, and there's a bird about to land on the camera. If that happens, we'll have to get back to the podcast in a minute. So these couple of thoughts. Okay, now, truth be told, my eyeballs are like the eyeballs of a chameleon right now. You know how they can focus on different things at the same time?
Right.
I'm focused on Luke, and I'm focused on thriving, and I'm also focused on Moss. Dude, I'm so excited about the science of moss. I feel like getting inside the microphone right now. I was up at 4:00 this morning reading the most extraordinary stuff.
About moss?
Yes. So anyway, what was left over in my heart from last week is something that I don't say very often. I resist telling people you really need to be part of a faith community. You never hear me say this.
Yeah, we are on the same team in that.
In fact, you'll often hear me say, trust yourself and follow your gut. Go where you need to go. Here's what Stan quickened in me back in our last retreat, and we've already planned the next one. So that was so good. We're going to do it again. Stan doesn't know that, but we're trying to plan the next one. Anyway, here's what I want to say increasingly with more emphasis, because I really believe it true in a new way now, and that is this. We can't thrive alone.
No,
we just can't thrive alone. We evolved to survive alone, but that's not the same thing as thriving. And so we are now living as a church in the gap, as a community, as a group of people that are in town and out of town. We're living in this conversation of what does it look like to go beyond surviving into thriving? Okay? So I'm going to tell you some of the science that I resisted telling you on last Sunday.
Okay.
I squeezed hours of reading about moss into essentially 85 words at the end of my sermon. And I only know that because I was shooting for under 100. One of the reasons why moss transitions from waterborne plant, photosynthetic organism, so think algae, one of the reasons that it goes from water up onto land successfully is because it figured out how to build a community. So if you get on your nose, on your knees, hands and knees, in the forest, almost any forest in the world, gosh, we could almost do that right here at the coffee shop. If you get down really closely to moss, there's a couple things that you figure out. It doesn't have a root system. So it has no ability to pull nutrients from the minerals in the soil. That's not what it does. The only thing it can do is pull its minerals from the atmosphere. So the only thing that feeds moss is the atmospheric precipitation. Humidity, dew, rainfall.
The light, all that.
Light. Yeah. So it's got to have two things at the same time to be able to be photosynthetic, in order to produce, in order to grow. It's got to have light, it's got to be illuminated, and it has to have water. Either of those two things that fail, it goes into what they call desiccation, or it goes into a rest. Doesn't die. It's the most fascinating thing about it. It just rests and waits. Okay? But in order to capture water, you see that a water molecule is this is chemistry. I hate to do this, but a water molecule is charged positive and negative on either end. That's why it adheres. That's why a drop of water on a waxy leaf, it'll find itself and it'll make one big drop because it's going to adhere to itself.
Gotcha.
So moss had to evolve the capacity to understand the gaps between water molecules and charge the leaves in such a way as to hold on to it, because it's its only chance to grow and thrive. But think about the principle there. Now, I know I'm reaching deep into the woods and everyone's rolling their eyes right now, and it's okay if you throw your back out rolling your eyes. This happens all the time. There's something super profound about the evolutionary bridge from water to land life being mastered by an organism that never successfully exists alone. It cannot thrive alone. So here's some of the reasons why I've resisted saying that. I would never want to build a church on people's guilt. Because the old message back in the day, not even that long ago, but in other churches,
It's still the message today.
around the corner, right? The message is, you can't be spiritual unless you're part of church. So I unplug that and say, that's worthless. That means I don't agree with that. I would never say that to anyone. A lot of my colleagues coming out of COVID are basically saying, you have to go back to church in order to grow. I will never say that. Here's what I can say with conviction. As we move from survival mode to thriving, as we move from that desiccated state of we're just going to hang on and wait until the resources are there again, if we're going to move into that thriving state, we're going to have to do that together. You can't solve injustice by yourself.
No.
You can't march for the causes that need representation in the streets by yourself. You can't be a diverse community by yourself. You can only see the world through the lens that you have, which is fine. It's part of the whole. But there's a whole dimension of life that you cannot experience alone. So I will never say, come to church or die, or don't grow, or that you have to come to church to be a disciple. But I will say this, you are missing something if you do it in isolation of a community. There are seasons for isolation. Seasons. But all seasons change. And then come seasons of growth and multiplication. Now, will it be followed by another winter season of isolation? Of course they will. But the same spirit that led Jesus into the isolation of the wilderness drew him back into community and public ministry.
That's right.
So I'm not sure I was clear enough on that on Sunday, because I resist any lever that's labeled guilt related to church attendance. I've been at ANC for 10 years now.
I mean, we are sick of that because we experienced that
That's right.
firsthand.
It's too familiar. I've been at ANC since November 1st, 2013. 10 years. One of the things I figured out early at ANC is that our people average about 1.47296 services a month. That's that obnoxious laugh. That's an obnoxious laugh, except that's a grackle. Anyway.
Yeah.
Our people average 1.5 times a month. And I learned early, that's just a thing about Austin. That's a thing about Texas. And I will never shame people for that. But here's what I can tell you. As the seasons change, we need each other differently. We need each other differently. I need you differently. And if the world is going to see a church that grows and thrives on progressive principles, that holds the text the way we do, that looks at history the way we do, that's honest about other faiths and what they contribute, if we're going to build a community that does that well, it's going to be a collective work. It can't happen alone.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking. What do you think about that? What do you think about what I'm thinking?
I mean, I totally agree with you. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. And when you said that we learn how to survive, but we need to learn how to thrive,
Yeah.
it came to my mind something that I heard to Bishop Spong a few years ago.
Such a crush on Bishop Spong, even though he's not with us anymore.
Yeah.
He's with us. His books are here.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
So he said that, you have that chance of, as soon as you defeat, the surviving thing, you have to choose about to keep in community or fight each other. It's like, and he said
Interesting.
that's why we fight all the time. I mean, because we are not working for surviving, because surviving keep us together in some way because we are trying to survive.
Right.
But as soon as you already survive, you can decide, okay, I will fight now.
It's so interesting.
or I will create community. And to fight all the time is way easier because we have tons of stuff to fight about it.
Yeah. Mostly who's right and who's not right, or who's righter,
Oh, yeah.
who's better. Bore me. Yeah.
A lot of that. So,
Yeah.
and we have plenty of that in this society, in Latin America, everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So must be a conscious decision,
Right.
okay, to decide. I don't want to spend time fighting with someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will spend my energy
Yeah.
creating community
Yeah.
in whatever form. Could
Yeah.
be a church, could be family,
Right.
could be
Right.
friends, could be a table, could be I
I
don't know.
love that. I love that thought. I'm done fighting. I just want to thrive now.
Yeah.
And the way to thrive is to do that as an honest embodiment of resource you have available, not in conflict to try to steal other resources. Okay, so here's a if you thought what we just talked about was geeky, this is even worse.
Oh my goodness.
There's a place in Wisconsin.
Let me remove my sunglasses to roll my eyes and make the camera capture
While
that.
you were dreaming sweet dreams this morning, I was up early reading about a particular rock formation in Wisconsin where some PhD work along moss was done. This is the kind of stuff that I live for. And so the question was, why are these varieties of moss perfectly stratified based on the height of, if you look at the river, if you look eye level to the water, it's one thriving species. 4 or 5 inches above, it's a completely different thriving species. 6 inches above, it's a different, and they're not mixing very much. And so whole doctoral theses have been done on this. So here's what was determined. Because of the nature of the rivers flooding and going down, different species could only thrive. The two species that would destroy one another had to be separated by this interstitial space of the species that were more flexible to the rising and the falling of water.
like a bridge.
Like a bridge.
Between species.
So there's a thesis, and I don't have the book with me, and I can't remember what it is, but it came from the study of moss. Now it applies to all of the species that all of the different sciences. There's greater variety in the interstitial space than there is in the extremes, and the reason is the extremes will fight each other for existence. And so there's this middle space, and so if we were to extrapolate that out, When we're done fighting these other species that want to argue, or these other embodiments of faith that want to argue for our end, you're not legit, we're going to picket your church, we're going to do all this stuff. The greatest diversity exists between those competitive things. We have to stop fighting if we're going to thrive.
Right.
We've got to stop fighting if we're going to thrive. And we have to adapt. We have to look at the resources available and say, this is what we can do with what we have. I'm so tired of feeling the guilt.
We don't need so many people. Maybe some of you guys, you need to let other people know that they are wrong or something like that. But the thing is, we can decide to don't do that.
We can simply decide to say,
Just don't do that.
I learned this from my previous boss, who I will leave unnamed, but who gave me lots of neckties because he would wear them for one TV appearance and then retire them. Anyway, I learned this from my former employer, who I love and admire. No fight in the man. He's not going to get in the mud pit. His thesis has always been, I want to welcome people who no one else is welcoming. So you guys, if these are your people, we support these being your people. We're not going to fight over those people. Let's work in the resources that are available. I was about to say, right as you had that thought, I'm so tired of feeling the guilt of not being the church that's perfect for everyone. The church that does everything a church can do. I'm tired of feeling the weight that says any one church ought to be the whole church. No. Thriving is a network reality. It's an interrelational reality. If you and I don't, here's the thing, going back to the thought, I'm going to wrap it up because we're going to bore people to tears with moss. If you and I don't grow next to each other and find ways to stay close, we will not hold on to the atmospheric water, and then we will die. We'll just go into desiccation.
Yeah.
We have to rely on one another to get the work done of thriving. So thriving is stop fighting with you, stop fighting in general, let all the toxicity and hostility go. No one needs to defend anything. Let it go. Let it go. Transformation is known to people in the process of being transformed. We don't have to argue for the legitimacy of new life springing from dead things. It's the way it all works. And so if we can tune out the social media trolling to make our points and fighting family at Thanksgiving dinner or arguing with people who no longer want to be in a relationship with us, you know what? Let's thrive, which means let's turn the work into what is most productive for us now. Okay, Does that make sense?
Yeah. If someone is still pushing you,
I like your hat.
and if someone is pushing you to keep fighting, you can decide to stop seeing that person.
Just guys, we
because
get one.
sometimes, if we are fighting, and eventually I said, Jason, I don't want to fight about this anymore. I love you so much. I don't want to make this thing take us apart.
Right.
But if you're not agree with that and you want to keep fighting, I have the right
to withdraw.
Okay, Jason, I love you so much, and I want to keep loving you. See you later, maybe in 5 years.
Right.
Bye.
See you from afar. We call that loving from a distance.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think there's just so much. There's so much meaning and magic in the moment that we're in as a church right now, because I think this is where we are. We're done proving ourselves. There's nothing to prove.
Yeah.
There's nothing to earn. There's nothing to lose. There's only life to live. And if that sounds eloquent, it's because it's the first tattoo I ever got says that.
I know.
There's nothing to earn, nothing to prove, nothing to lose.
Show to the camera. Try to. There you go.
Nothing to earn, nothing to prove, nothing to lose.
Right.
If we can just live that way, then here, 100% of our resources and energy can go to thriving.
Yeah.
Final story, I promise. Final story.
About moss?
Yes. Final story. Moss species sometimes go.
I'm rolling my eyes.
They go from male to female and back in between. The plant will literally be.
That's so interesting.
Right. And so a longitudinal study was done on why a particular moss went through these stages from these tall green seed pods waiting for raindrops to disperse to orange color male spores waiting for the winds to carry them. And we're talking about the very same plant. How can it be a female producing situation that raindrops disperse, maybe 15 centimeters max, to something the wind carries? How does it do it? And so everybody looked at this and thought, well, it's for this, it's for that, maybe it's the resources, maybe this rock is cooler than this log. Has nothing to do with that. It literally understood, based on the density of the network of moss, when it was time to be more efficient, and it would transition from producing eggs to producing spores. It just knows. If it, in other words, a plant that doesn't need to put all its effort into producing tons of spores and scattering millions of little spore pods around, simply doesn't put the effort into it. It turns that effort into something much more productive.
Right.
It's not fighting the life situation in which it finds itself. So turn this back to church thinking. It's time to stop fighting the need or the desire to prove that we are something and just thrive where we are. There's a point at which the current of a river can just take you where the river was going to take you anyway. You can fight it if you want, or you can just pull your feet up and go. And I just feel like there's meaning and magic in the moment that we're in, because I think this is us saying we're fatigued by all the resistance. We're just going to join it now. God's doing a unique thing among us, a thing that we uniquely can address and build. And I'm not going to argue for its legitimacy. We're just going to be busy about doing it. I think it's something. I think it's important.
I think it's totally important.
Yeah, that was like the thread in the sweater you pulled, and the whole sweater just unraveled. I don't know.
Yeah, I like it.
But it's been fun. So coming up, we're going to talk about Zacchaeus, who is one of those words in the English language that I spell wrong every single time.
Oh, really?
100% of the time. Yeah, Zacchaeus. Can't get it spelled right. But yeah, we're going fun places.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, Sunday leftovers.
On the leftovers.
Booyah.
See you guys.
Hope nobody asked a question. 'Cause we didn't
No.
answer 'em.
Oh, yep.